Let me tell you about the last morning I walked into my own building. I didn't know it was the last morning. That's the thing about betrayal when it comes from the right person. It arrives looking exactly like a Tuesday. My name is Diana Voss. I am 42 years old. My father built a coffee company from a single cart in Pike Place Market in 1987. By the time he died, it was 43 locations across the Pacific Northwest. By the time I ran it for 8 years, it was 61. I gave my life to that company. I gave it my 20s and my 30s, and the marriage that didn't survive my 80s because I was always at the office. I also gave my little sister a job, then a title, then a seat at the table. Then, though I did not know this until it was too late, I gave her the keys. My sister's name is Chloe. She is 38 years old. She has my father's eyes. She used them very effectively in a boardroom on a Tuesday morning in November to watch me be removed from the company my father built, without saying a word, without looking away. My name is Diana Voss. I am 42 years old. I grew up in Seattle, the specific Seattle of the 90s, before the tech money reshaped the city's understanding of itself. The Seattle of flannel and rain, and the particular Pacific Northwest quality of being in a place that is beautiful in a way that does not announce itself, that you have to be paying attention to notice. My father, Robert Voss, was a man who paid attention. He had come to Seattle from Portland in 1985 with $4,000 and a specific conviction, not about coffee exactly, but about the particular need of a cold, gray, beautiful city for something warm. He worked in a roaster for 2 years, learning the trade with the specific patience of someone who understands that you cannot skip the learning part. He opened his first cart in 1987, Pike Place Market, the North End, the specific geography of a city's oldest public market where the fish throwers are and the tourists come, and the regulars know which vendors are actually worth the line. He was worth the line. By 1995, he had 3 locations. By 2003, he had 14. He died in 2015 of a heart attack at 67. Not dramatically, not young, but earlier than any of us had been ready for, at his desk in the Belltown office reviewing the lease documents for location 39. He left me the company, not equally to Chloe, to me. I want to be precise about this because it matters for what happened later. My father left controlling interest in Voss Coffee to me. He left Chloe a significant minority stake, 22%, meaningful and valuable. He left a letter explaining his reasoning, which I read once and have not been able to read since. He said, "Diana knows what this company is. She has always known. Trust her with it." I thought for 8 years that Chloe had accepted this. I was wrong. I need to tell you about Chloe. Not the version that I walked into the boardroom on a Tuesday morning in November, the version I had known for 38 years. Chloe Voss is 4 years younger than me. She grew up in the same house, with the same father, watching the same company grow from a cart to something significant. She had, in childhood, a quality that I had always loved, a warmth, a social intelligence, the specific gift of someone who walks into a room and makes everyone in it feel immediately comfortable. She was funny. She was charming. She could talk to anyone about anything and leave them feeling better about themselves than when she arrived. These are real qualities. They are also, I have come to understand, professional qualities. Very useful in boardrooms. Very useful in the specific work of making people feel, over the course of many months, that they are valued and understood, and that the decisions they are being asked to make are reasonable. Very useful for someone who is building a quiet coalition. I hired Chloe at 29, not because she was my sister. I want to be clear about this because I have replayed the decision many times in the years since. I hired her because she was genuinely qualified. She had an MBA from UW, she had spent 5 years in retail operations at a company in Portland, she understood the business. I made her VP of Operations at 34. She was good at it. She was, I believed, my most trusted person. She was trusted by definition. She was my sister. The trust preceded the professional relationship. That precedence was the vulnerability. The Tuesday morning. I had been called to a board meeting. This was not unusual. I chaired the board. I called the meetings. The rhythm of quarterly governance was familiar enough to be unremarkable. What was unusual was that this meeting had been called by someone else. The email had come from Gerald Park, our longest-serving independent board member, a man I had known for 6 years and trusted the way you trust someone who has shown up consistently and professionally for 6 years. Board meeting requested, Tuesday, 9 a.m., executive session. Executive session meant without me. And then, below, your attendance is also requested at the conclusion of the executive session, approximately 10:30. I had read the email 3 times, an executive session that concluded with my attendance. I had thought, this is unusual. I had not thought, this is the end, because the email came from Gerald Park, and Gerald Park had known my father, and Gerald Park had at my father's funeral held my hand briefly in the receiving line and said, "Robert was proud of you. He told me that, more than once." I had trusted Gerald Park. He had been at 11 consecutive board meetings. He had voted with me on every significant decision. He had been, for 6 years, a consistent and reliable presence. He had also been, for the past 4 months, having dinner with Chloe. I did not know that part yet. I walked into the building at 9:15 on a Tuesday morning in November. I took the elevator to the 14th floor. I said good morning to the receptionist who had worked our front desk for 9 years. I walked toward the conference room. The conference room, where my father had signed the lease on location 20, where I had presented our expansion strategy to investors in 2017, where I had, 2 years ago, celebrated our 60th location with the board over catered lunch from our Eastlake store. I pushed open the door, and I understood in the specific way of understanding sometimes arrives, complete and instantaneous, and without the mercy of gradual attachment, exactly what I was walking into. There were 8 people in the room. All 6 board members, our general counsel, a man named Thomas Reedy who had been with the company for 11 years, and Chloe, sitting at the far end of the table, in my chair, not the chair to my right, my chair, the one at the head of the table, the one my father had sat in before me. She looked at me when I came in. She did not look away. Gerald Park stood. "Diana," he said, "please sit." I sat. Not because I was not afraid, because the alternative, the visible performance of resistance, would have given them something to point to. I sat. Thomas Reedy opened a folder. He spoke for approximately 12 minutes. I will not take you through every word because the legal language in which destaving things are packaged is not the most important thing about them. The substance. The board had convened in executive session to review a report prepared by an outside psychiatric consultant retained by the board, raising concerns about my capacity to lead the company. The report cited specific incidents over the past 18 months, a decision reversed, a presentation abandoned mid-sentence, an email chain in which my communication had been, according to the report, erratic. The report recommended a period of, the specific language was, leadership transition. The board had voted, 5-1. Who voted against? I asked. A pause. Margaret Sue, Gerald said. Margaret Sue was on the board for 2 years. She was the newest member. She was the only one who had not been to dinner with Chloe. The transition, I said. Who assumes leadership? Thomas Reedy looked at the folder. The board has appointed an interim CEO pending a formal search. Who? He looked up. Chloe Voss. I looked at my sister. She still was looking at me. She still had not looked away. Chloe, I said. She said nothing. She held my gaze. And I understood in the specific way of someone who has just been given information that reorganizes everything they thought they understood about a person they have known their entire life, that this had been coming for a long time, that the warmth and the social intelligence and the specific gift of making people feel comfortable had been pointed at the 6 people sitting in this room, and that it had worked. I left the building at 11:15. Not escorted. They had not done that. There was a dignity protocol, apparently, which Thomas Wrighty had outlined. I would have 2 weeks to transition my responsibilities, access to my email for 30 days, a severance package outlined in the documents he had slid across the table. I had not taken the documents. I had stood up. I had looked at each person in the room. Gerald Park, Margaret Sue, the 4 others whose names I knew as well as my own. Thomas Wrighty, Chloe. I had not said anything, because there was nothing to say that would change what had already been decided, because the decision had been made over dinners and phone calls and the specific patient work of months. My words in that room, in that moment, would have been approximately as effective as words always are against something that has already been done. I left. I took the elevator down. I said goodbye to the receptionist who had worked our front desk for 9 years. She looked at my face. She did not know yet. She would know by afternoon. Have a good day, Miss Voss. Thank you, Sandra. I walked out of my father's building, into the Seattle November, and I sat in my car for a very long time. The first weeks were the hardest. Not the legal process. That came later, and it was its own kind of hard, the grinding procedural difficulty of challenging a board decision while the person you are challenging continues to run the company your father built. The first weeks were hard in a different way. The specific difficulty of not knowing what to do with yourself when the structure that has organized your life for 8 years, the daily rhythm of it, the problems that needed solving, the decisions that needed making, the people who called you because you were the person they called, when all of that was removed simultaneously. I had worked 60-hour weeks for 8 years. I had worked 70 during the expansion years. I had not taken a vacation that was not interrupted since 2018, and now I was home. In the house in Capitol Hill that I had bought in 2014, and that felt in those first weeks like a place I had borrowed from someone else. My phone stopped ringing. Not immediately. The first 2 days there were calls, former colleagues, some of the location managers I had worked directly with, people who had heard and were calling with the specific awkward warmth of people who don't know what to say but want to say something. By the end of the first week, the calls had mostly stopped. By the end of the second week, my email access was restricted. By the end of the third week, I understood that the social world that had organized me for 8 years was in significant part a professional social world, the kind that is attached to the position and not to the person. I was no longer the position. The world had reorganized accordingly. I called my attorney. Her name was Priya Sharma. She had been recommended by Margaret Sue, the board member who had voted against, who had called me 2 days after the meeting and said in the specific, careful way of someone who is trying to be helpful within limits they cannot explain, "Call Priya Sharma. Don't ask me why. Just call her." I called her. Priya Sharma's office was in South Lake Union. She was 45, lean and precise, the kind of attorney who makes you feel sitting across from her that the situation is being handled correctly, even when the situation is very difficult. I told her everything: the email, the meeting, the report, the vote. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked for the documents,
the ones I had not taken from the conference room, which Thomas Wrighty had subsequently sent to my personal email with a cover note about the transition timeline. She read them carefully. She asked questions. The psychiatric report. Who had prepared it? When? What my knowledge of any mental health concerns had been prior to November. I told her, none. I had not been experiencing any mental health concerns. I had not been referred to any mental health professional by anyone at the company. The incidents cited in the report, the reversed decision, the abandoned presentation, the email chain, had explanations that had nothing to do with capacity. She wrote things down. Deanna, I want to ask you something, and I want you to think about it carefully. In the 18 months prior to November, the period covered by the report, did anything change in Chloe's behavior, in her access to board members, in her communication with you? I thought about it. I stopped. She was more present at board events, more social with the members. I noticed, but I attributed it to, I thought she was networking, building relationships that would serve the company. Which board members specifically? I named them. Gerald Park, the other 4 who had voted against me. And the dinners Gerald had been at. He had been at several dinners in the past 4 months. I found that out after. A location manager mentioned seeing them in a restaurant in Eastlake in September. I didn't think anything of it at the time. September, Priya said. 2 months before the meeting. Yes. She looked at her notes. Deanna, the report was commissioned in August. I looked at her. 3 months before the meeting, I said. 3 months before the meeting, Priya said, which means the process began before the dinners, which means the dinners were not the beginning. I sat with that. When did it begin? I said. I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out.
What Priya found took 3 months. I will not take you through all of it. It was methodical and exhausting and involved the specific forensic work of tracing communication patterns and financial records and the meeting logs of a board that had not individually done anything illegal. It produced a picture. The picture, Chloe had begun cultivating board relationships 18 months before the November meeting, not suddenly, gradually, in the specific, patient way of someone who understands that what she was building required time to build. She had used her position as VP of Operations to schedule one-on-one meetings with board members for operational updates. This was legitimate. It was within her role, but the meetings had been longer than operational updates required, and they had, over time, shifted from operational to strategic. She had begun presenting in these meetings, not in full board sessions, alternative perspectives on company direction, not criticisms exactly. Reframings, the specific language of someone who is making a case without appearing to make a case. She had commissioned the psychiatric report herself, not through the company, through a consulting firm she had a personal relationship with. The report had been presented to the board as an independent assessment. It was not independent. The consultant had worked with Chloe previously. This was not disclosed in the report. Is that actionable? I said when Priya presented the picture. The non-disclosure of the relationship between Chloe and the consultant is potentially significant, Priya said carefully. The board's vote, based on a report with an undisclosed conflict of interest, may be challengeable. May be, I said. Corporate law is not simple, she said, but we have something. We have the beginning of a case. I looked at the documents. The picture. 18 months of patient, deliberate work. My sister, I said. She planned this for 1.5 years. At least, Priya said. I called my father's oldest friend in January. His name was Bernard Cole.
71 years old, retired, a man who had known my father since 1983 and who had been, in the years since my father's death, someone I called occasionally and not often enough. He answered on the second ring. "Diana," he said, "I've been waiting for you to call." "You heard," I said. "Seattle is a small city underneath the surface," he said. "Yes, I heard." I told him everything. Not the legal strategy, the other everything. The Tuesday morning, Chloe's face, the chair, the letter my father had left. Diana knows what this company is. She has always known. Trust her with it. Bernard was quiet for a long time. "Your father knew," he said. "Knew what?" I said. "That Chloe wanted it," he said. "He told me once, this was maybe a year before he died, he said Chloe had come to him, asked him about succession, about whether the company might be divided differently." I sat very still. "What did he tell her?" I said. "He told her that the company needed one leader, that dividing authority would damage what he had built. He told her Diana was the right person to lead it." "And she accepted that?" I said. "She appeared to," Bernard said. I thought about 18 months of dinners, of one-on-one meetings, of a psychiatric report commissioned from a consultant with an undisclosed relationship. "She didn't accept it," I said. "No," Bernard said. Bernard said something else before we hung up, something I have thought about every day since. "Diana," Bernard said, "your father left you something else, besides the company." "The letter," I said. "Not the letter," he said. "The other thing, the thing he told me about 2 weeks before he died." I went very still. "What thing?" I said. Bernard told me. I sat in my Capitol Hill house in January, the Seattle rain against the windows, the specific sound of a city that knows how to wait out weather because it has no choice. And I thought about my father, about a man who had built 43 locations from a single cart, who knew at the end exactly what he was doing, who left me the company, and something else, something Chloe did not know about, something that had been waiting for exactly this.
My father had a lawyer. Not Thomas Reedy. Thomas Reedy was the company's general counsel, and Thomas Reedy had been in that conference room on a Tuesday morning in November, sliding documents across the table. My father's personal lawyer, a woman named Helen Park, no relation to Gerald, who had 63 and handled my father's personal legal affairs for 20 years, and who had, upon his death, executed his will and closed the estate, and then, this is the thing Bernard had told me, retained a single document, not in the estate files, in her personal office safe. A document my father had prepared 8 months before he died. A document that was not part of the estate, because it was not a will or a trust or any instrument that required probate. It was a shareholder agreement. Specifically, a provision signed by my father and witnessed by Helen Park and Bernard that established certain conditions under which the company's foundational ownership structure could not be altered without the consent of the original founder's designated heir, which was me. "He knew," I said to Helen Park, sitting in her office in February. "He was a careful man," Helen said. "He had built something significant. He understood that significant things attract people who want them. Even family," I said. She looked at me carefully. "Especially family," she said, in her experience. I looked at the document. 20 pages. My father's signature at the bottom of the last page. His handwriting. The specific forward slant of it, the way the capital letters were slightly larger than necessary, the way I had seen it on birthday cards and checks and the lease document for location 39. "Is it enforceable?" I said. "It has never been tested," Helen said, "but it was prepared carefully. Your father paid for careful preparation." "What does it do, specifically?" I said. "It establishes," Helen said, "that any board action that results in the removal of the designated heir from operational leadership based on a report that was not independently verified by a second qualified assessor is procedurally defective and subject to challenge." I looked at her. "The psychiatric report," I said. "It wasn't independently verified." "No," Helen said. "It was a single assessment from a consultant with an undisclosed relationship to the person who commissioned it. The relationship had been known to both parties. It had not been disclosed to the board.
Gerald Park, deposed in April, testified that he had not known about the prior relationship between Chloe and the consultant when he voted. He was quiet for a long time after that question. The deposition transcript noted, witness paused approximately 45 seconds before responding. If I had known, he said, I would have required independent verification. Margaret Sue, the board member who had voted against, who had called me and said call Priya Sharma, testified in May. She had suspected something was wrong before the vote. She had not been able to identify it specifically. She had voted no because the specific speed of the process had felt wrong to her. Board decisions of this magnitude should not happen this quickly. There should be more process, more verification. The speed concerned her. The speed that Chloe had designed into the process, because speed in the specific work of removing someone before they can respond is a feature, not a flaw. The settlement was reached in October, 11 months after a Tuesday morning in November. I will not take you through all of it. What I will tell you is the shape of it. Priya filed the challenge in March. The basis, procedural defect in the board's November action, grounded in the shareholder agreement my father had prepared. Chloe's legal team, she had retained a large firm, expensive, the kind that specializes in exactly this kind of corporate dispute, moved to dismiss. The motion to dismiss was denied. The undisclosed relationship between Chloe and the consultant was the central issue. In the discovery process, emails surfaced. The consultant had worked with Chloe on a previous project. The relationship had been known to both parties. It had not been disclosed to the board. Gerald Park, deposed in April, testified that he had not known about the prior relationship between Chloe and the consultant when he voted. He was quiet for a long time after that question. The deposition transcript noted, witness paused approximately 45 seconds before responding. If I had known, he said, I would have required independent verification. Margaret Sue, the board member who had voted against, who had called me and said call Priya Sharma, testified in May. She had suspected something was wrong before the vote. She had not been able to identify it specifically. She had voted no because the specific speed of the process had felt wrong to her. Board decisions of this magnitude should not happen this quickly. There should be more process, more verification. The speed concerned her. The speed that Chloe had designed into the process, because speed in the specific work of removing someone before they can respond is a feature, not a flaw. The settlement was reached in October, 11 months after a Tuesday morning in November. I will not take you through all of it. What I will tell you is the shape of it. Priya filed the challenge in March. The basis, procedural defect in the board's November action, grounded in the shareholder agreement my father had prepared. Chloe's legal team, she had retained a large firm, expensive, the kind that specializes in exactly this kind of corporate dispute, moved to dismiss. The motion to dismiss was denied. The undisclosed relationship between Chloe and the consultant was the central issue. In the discovery process, emails surfaced. The consultant had worked with Chloe on a previous project. The relationship had been known to both parties. It had not been disclosed to the board. Gerald Park, deposed in April, testified that he had not known about the prior relationship between Chloe and the consultant when he voted. He was quiet for a long time after that question. The deposition transcript noted, witness paused approximately 45 seconds before responding. If I had known, he said, I would have required independent verification. Margaret Sue, the board member who had voted against, who had called me and said call Priya Sharma, testified in May. She had suspected something was wrong before the vote. She had not been able to identify it specifically. She had voted no because the specific speed of the process had felt wrong to her. Board decisions of this magnitude should not happen this quickly. There should be more process, more verification. The speed concerned her. The speed that Chloe had designed into the process, because speed in the specific work of removing someone before they can respond is a feature, not a flaw. The settlement was reached in October, 11 months after a Tuesday morning in November. I will not take you through all of it. What I will tell you is the shape of it. Priya filed the challenge in March. The basis, procedural defect in the board's November action, grounded in the shareholder agreement my father had prepared. Chloe's legal team, she had retained a large firm, expensive, the kind that specializes in exactly this kind of corporate dispute, moved to dismiss. The motion to dismiss was denied. The undisclosed relationship between Chloe and the consultant was the central issue. In the discovery process, emails surfaced. The consultant had worked with Chloe on a previous project. The relationship had been known to both parties. It had not been disclosed to the board. Gerald Park, deposed in April, testified that he had not known about the prior relationship between Chloe and the consultant when he voted. He was quiet for a long time after that question. The deposition transcript noted, "Witness paused approximately 45 seconds before responding. If I had known," he said, "I would have required independent verification." Margaret Sue, the board member who had voted against, who had called me and said call Priya Sharma, testified in May. She had suspected something was wrong before the vote. She had not been able to identify it specifically. She had voted no because the specific speed of the process had felt wrong to her. Board decisions of this magnitude should not happen this quickly. There should be more process, more verification. The speed concerned her. The speed that Chloe had designed into the process. Because speed in the specific work of removing someone before they can respond is a feature, not a flaw. The settlement was reached in October, 11 months after a Tuesday morning in November. I will not take you through all of it. What I will tell you is the shape of it. Priya filed the challenge in March. The basis, procedural defect in the board's November action, grounded in the shareholder agreement my father had prepared. Chloe's legal team, she had retained a large firm, expensive, the kind that specializes in exactly this kind of corporate dispute, moved to dismiss. The motion to dismiss was denied. The undisclosed relationship between Chloe and the consultant was the central issue. In the discovery process, emails surfaced. The consultant had worked with Chloe on a previous project. The relationship had been known to both parties. It had not been disclosed to the board. Gerald Park, deposed in April, testified that he had not known about the prior relationship between Chloe and the consultant when he voted. He was quiet for a long time after that question. The deposition transcript noted, "Witness paused approximately 45 seconds before responding." If I had known, he said, I would have required independent verification. Margaret Sue, the board member who had voted against, who had called me and said call Priya Sharma, testified in May. She had suspected something was wrong before the vote. She had not been able to identify it specifically. She had voted no because the specific speed of the process had felt wrong to her. Board decisions of this magnitude should not happen this quickly. There should be more process, more verification. The speed concerned her. The speed that Chloe had designed into the process. Because speed in the specific work of removing someone before they can respond is a feature, not a flaw. The settlement was reached in October, 11 months after a Tuesday morning in November. I will not take you through all of it. What I will tell you is the shape of it. Priya filed the challenge in March. The basis, procedural defect.
Chloe, I have saved this for last because it is the most complicated part, and I want to be honest about the complication. Chloe left the company as part of the settlement terms. She retained her 22% stake. This was not changeable. It was her inheritance, whatever she had done with what surrounded it. She moved to Portland. I know this from mutual contacts, not from her. We have not spoken since the Tuesday morning in November when she sat at the head of my father's table and watched me be removed from the company he had left me. I have thought many times about whether I will speak to her. Not about whether I should forgive her. Forgiveness is a different question, one that I am not required to resolve on anyone's timeline but my own. About whether I will speak to her. The answer I keep arriving at is someday. Not soon, but someday. Because she is my father's daughter. Because whatever she did, and what she did was a specific, calculated, patient betrayal that I am not going to minimize, she is still the person I grew up alongside. Both things are true. I am not required to act on both of them immediately, but I am not going to pretend only one of them is true. My father raised me to be precise. The precise truth is both. Bernard came to Seattle in November. 1 year after the Tuesday morning when she sat at the head of my father's table and watched me be removed from the company he had left me. He took me to the Pike Place cart, not our cart. The original location had been replaced by a proper storefront 20 years ago, but the address was the same, the north end of the market, the spot where my father had set up in 1987 with $4,000 and a specific conviction about what a cold, gray, beautiful city needed. We stood outside, the November rain, the market going about its business around us. He would be proud. Of the lawsuit? Of you, Bernard said. Of how you handled it. Not quickly, not dramatically. You built a case. You used the tools he left you. You were precise. I looked at the storefront. Location 1. Still making coffee. Still making it the way my father had specified. The roast profile, the grind setting, the specific water temperature that had been in our operations manual since 1992 and that I had fought to keep consistent across 61 locations. He left me the document, I said, 8 months before he died. He knew, Bernard said. He knew Chloe would try. He knew someone would try, Bernard said. He didn't necessarily know it was Chloe. I looked at the rain on the market roof. Do you think he would have been surprised? Bernard was quiet for a moment. No, he said. I don't think he would have been surprised. We stood in the rain. The coffee was good. It was always good.
Voss Coffee has 64 locations now, 3 more since I came back. Not fast expansion, careful expansion. The specific pace of growth that my father had always maintained. The pace that builds something that lasts, rather than something that looks impressive and then contracts. The Seattle flagship, our Belltown location, the one my father had opened in 1999, had its 25th anniversary last spring. We closed it for 1 evening. Staff only. The people who had been with us for years, the location managers, the roasters, the people who had stayed through the 11 months when the company was someone else's. I made a speech. I am not a natural speechmaker. My father was. I have spent my career working around that difference. But I made a speech. And the thing I said that I remember most clearly, the thing that came out in the specific, unplanned way of true things that emerge when you are not trying to perform them, was this. My father built this company on one conviction, that a cold, gray, beautiful city needs something warm. I spent 8 years trying to understand what he meant by that. I think I understand it better now than I did before. He didn't mean the coffee, he meant the consistency, the showing up every day, in the rain, with the same quality, the same care, the trust that when you come back tomorrow it will still be here. That's what warm means, not temperature. Continuity. The room was quiet for a moment. And then it wasn't. Priya Sharma has become something more than my attorney. Not a friend exactly. The professional relationship is still there, clear and appropriate, but someone whose counsel I trust in the specific, broader way of people who have been present through the hardest thing you have done, and done it correctly. She asked me once, after everything was resolved, what I had learned. About corporate law, I said. About yourself, she said. I thought about it, honestly. I said that I was too trusting, and that being too trusting is not the same as being wrong to trust. The betrayal was Chloe's failure. The overtrust was mine. Both things are true, and they belong to different categories. What will you do differently? She asked. I've built a board process that makes what Chloe did structurally harder to do again. I've built in the independent verification requirement that my father anticipated. I've done the structural work. And personally, she said, I thought about Chloe, about 38 years, about my father's letter. Diana knows what this company is. She has always known. I'll still trust people, I said. I'm not going to stop trusting people because one person used it against me, but I'll be more precise about it, more deliberate, more like my father.
Priya looked at me. "He was quite a man," she said. Yes, he was.
I went to my father's grave in December. Not dramatically. I go every year, around the anniversary of his death, the specific ritual of someone who finds that certain things are best done in person rather than held only internally. Lakeview Cemetery, the Capitol Hill neighborhood, which is also where I live, which is not a coincidence. I had bought the house partially because of the cemetery's proximity, which is the kind of thing you admit to yourself, but not always to other people. I stood for a while. The Seattle December, the specific quality of winter light in the Pacific Northwest, low, filtered, the sun making its presence known without fully committing. I told him what had happened. Not the legal details. He would have found those interesting, but not central. The other things. That I had used what he left me. That it had worked. That the company was at 64 locations. That I was trying to be precise. That Chloe was in Portland. That I did not know yet what to do with that. That the coffee at location 1 was still exactly right. I stood for a long time. The rain started eventually, the way it always does in Seattle in December. I stayed until I was done, then I walked home. My father's letter, the one I read once and have not read since. I took it out last month, not for any specific reason, or not a reason I could have articulated before I did it. Sometimes things are ready to be looked at when they weren't before. I read it again. Diana knows what this company is. She has always known. Trust her with it. 2 sentences. I had spent 8 years understanding the second one. Trust her with it. Trust me, with the company, with the responsibility. I had spent the past year understanding the first one. Diana knows what this company is. Not Diana knows how to run it. Not Diana understands the financials or the operations or the expansion strategy. Diana knows what it is. I thought about what my father had built. A cart in a cold, gray, beautiful city. A conviction about what warmth means. Not temperature. Continuity. Showing up in the rain. The same quality, the same care. The trust that when you come back tomorrow, it will still be here. I folded the letter. I put it back in the drawer that it has lived since 2015. I went to make coffee. The specific roast profile, the water temperature from the 1992 operations manual, the way my father made it, the way I will make it, the way I have always known how to make it. He was right about that. I have always known. That's the whole story, or the part I'm ready to tell. I want to say something about documents, about the specific, quiet, unannounced power of a careful person who understands that the things they are building might be threatened, and who prepares for that threat not dramatically, but precisely. My father prepared a document 8 months before he died. He did not tell me about it. He did not tell Chloe about it. He told Bernard, and Bernard told me when I needed to know. This is what it looks like when someone loves you and also knows the world clearly. Not protection in the sense of keeping you from difficulty, protection in the sense of making sure you have what you need when the difficulty arrives. He could not have known, specifically, what Chloe would do. He could not have known it would be a psychiatric report and a board vote on a Tuesday morning in November, but he knew that what he was building had value, and that value attracts people who want it, and the people who want it are sometimes the ones you least expect. He left me the company. He also left me the document, and the document was the thing that mattered more, because companies can be taken. The mechanisms for taking them are real and legal, and they are used. But a careful person who loves you can build something into the foundation that makes the taking harder. That is what my father did, and that is what I am trying to do now, for the people who work in this company, for the locations that carry his name, for the next person who sits at the head of that table. Build carefully. Prepare for what you cannot see. Leave something in the foundation. The coffee is at 64 locations. The water temperature is correct. The rain is doing what Seattle rain does. And I am still here, still showing up. The same care, the same quality. Continuity. Thanks for listening.